Thank you. Okay, thank you for coming to this regular meeting of the Oversight Board, to the successor agency of West Covina Redevelopment Agency, and welcome to our audiences on all of our social media platforms and our audience in the public. Okay, we have a new member today, so could we swear her in before we?
Do the rest of the night? Absolutely.
And yeah.
Just want to come out front and do it, or?
Yes. Are you? He's been sworn in already.
No, I'm not going to. You want to get me to sing? Yeah, so if you want to read it from there, and I'll hold the microphone for you.
Yeah, you raise your right hand.
Yeah, they're right.
Can you please state your name?
I, Jessica Shoemaker,
Do solemnly swear or affirm that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you're about to enter. If you agree, please say, I do.
I do.
Congratulations.
Great. Thank you so much.
We'll have a little signing ceremony for you afterwards.
Okay, so now if we could do the roll call, Madam Clerk.
Board Member Chavez? Here. Board Member Gregoric? Board Member McDonald? Board Member Shoemaker? Here. Board Member Stewart?
Here.
Board Member Sykes?
Here.
Chairperson Setkin?
Here. And Kelly McDonald has an alternate present?
That is correct. Gerardo Rojas here.
Board Member Rojas? My apologies.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'd like Mr. Sykes to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Please join me in the pledge to the flag of our nation. Right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Chairperson, no change to today's agenda.
Okay, great. We have public comment. Do we have any speaker cards from the public? No? Okay. We have the public in the audience, but they're just not signing up to speak today. Okay, so let us go through the consent calendar first, which are the approval of the minutes. I would like to ask, though, that on B and C and D, that we have discussion with the staff presentation first and the possibility for questions. Okay?
Be more than happy to.
Okay, but I'm looking for a motion to approve A.
Before that, Madam Chair.
Do you want to review? Okay.
On the minutes, I was not on.
Microphone, please, sir. If you want to, actually, you need to share with Ms. Sutkin. There you go.
Up until June 2016, I was not on the board, so I would abstain up until June on the minutes, and then going forward, the vote would be yes.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
The same applies to me. In January, I was not here, so if as I say yes, why I'll be missing one meeting, which I would not be involved in. January 15th, I was not here.
Understood. If I can, I'll have the attorney just make a presentation about minutes. You don't actually have to be present in order to adopt those, but I'll let him explain that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's entirely up to you. The minutes are simply accepted. You're not approving the substance of them. On the other hand, if you want to abstain from meetings that you didn't attend, obviously, and so you don't have any knowledge of what occurred during those meetings, that's fine as well.
That's fine. Thank you.
Absolutely.
well, and I have the same, because this is my first meeting, so I would be abstaining from all of them.
I'll second.
Okay, very good. So we have a motion to approve minutes. Do you want to read, shall we read them?
No, you-
Regular
no,
minutes?
No, you just
You're
read
just,
the body.
it's
We're
the
okay?
consent calendar.
As
Right.
listed, okay. So motion to approve with a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. We do have some abstentions.
Well, note that the the abstentions, 3 abstentions
Three.
based on when they recant their term.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to item B, an update regarding the long-range property management plan and disposition of certain properties. And we would like staff to report, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, members of the Oversight Board. Before you this afternoon are going to be a couple different properties, just to give an update to the Oversight Board with regards to successor agency parcels that are being up for consideration for future sale. If it's okay, we'll combine both items B and C into one report. And if I can, I'll have both myself and Ms. Morales make that presentation. At your last meeting, there was a discussion about what we are defining as the water tank properties. Those are 2 parcels that the M&A Gabay Company is looking to acquire as part of their future office building development. There was an E&A in place for that discussion. The City Council or the successor agency has chosen not to move forward with an E&A with that company at this time because there's really not a need for an E&A since we're looking to do a purchase and sale agreement eventually, or purchase and development agreement with the Charles Company to move forward with their development. So we hope to have that to you sometime later this year for consideration. Is there any questions about that parcel? Yeah, or that property?
Kind of, is the Charles Company the same as
It's
Gubby?
it's M&A Gabay, which represents the 2 brothers that own the company, and the Charles Company is kind of the parent company at one time, but they're starting to separate their operations. But it is under M&A Gabay as the actual acquisition of the property.
So just to clarify, what are the APNs that we're talking about, please?
Ms. Morales, can you help me with those? Are
Yes,
those
I can.
933, 934?
So the water tank parcels that City Manager Freeland is referring to are 8735-001-933 and 8735-001-934.
Okay, thank you.
And so those are the 2 agency assets that have been dubbed water tank parcels.
Those are highlighted in the staff report 4C for your review. Yeah.
Okay.
So any additional questions about the water tank properties? Otherwise, I'll move on to the remaining properties for the potential development.
So what is the action that you're requesting on the water tank property?
No action, it's just
action.
receive and file, just for your information.
Okay. That you're no longer recommending that these parcels be sold to this entity?
No, that's not correct. All we're
Okay.
saying is that there's no E&A in place at this time, that the city of West Covina is looking to do a purchase and development agreement with them,
So this will still come back to us?
eventually.
Yeah. The only thing on the agenda tonight for both of them is an update of the status. So it's just, both of them are receiving files. When there is some status that is, presumably the properties are sold, then you're going to get to see that.
Disposition, okay. Any questions on those 2 parcels? No? Okay, so if I understand again, it's not that the parcels aren't needed, and it's not that water tanks aren't needed. It's that an E&A is not needed,
Correct.
because,
Because they're the only entity at this time that's able to acquire those properties. So the city attorney has advised that an E&A is not necessary because M&A Gabay are the ones that have the deed restrictions and are the ones required to do the improvements to the property.
But you also mentioned there's going to be a PSA in the future,
There will be,
and it'll come to us?
yes.
okay.
There'll be a ratification of the successor agency's action.
Okay.
So yeah, there will be a future agreement for the sale, and that will come before the Oversight Board for approval.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so thank you. So that was the 4C report.
And then 4B is the properties that the Oversight Board has been referred to as the golf course properties, also as the potential for the Singpoli development. Just an update that the city of West Covina is in another E&A with the Singpoli group with regards to these properties. It's a 180-day E&A with the ability to extend for an additional 180 days.
That was 90.
In that period of time, the city council has directed city staff to have the developer, city staff meet with 4 different agencies that have oversight of the property. That is the Fish and Game, Department of Toxic Substance Control, Cal Recycle, and U.S. Fish and Game. All 4 of those meetings have been scheduled and will be handled in the next probably 30 to 60 days. So probably at your next, or actually at a future oversight board meeting, we'll give you an update on how those meetings went. Just so you know, those meetings are intended to allow those agencies to give insight into the potential development that Sigpoli is proposing up there, some of the challenges, concerns that they may have, any obstacles they may have in their development, so that way the developers can make a decision on updating their site plan and their decision of what type of development they wish to do up there. And so we had an opportunity to take a few of the oversight board members up to the BKK landfill the other day and kind of point out some of the issues that are up there. As you are all aware, this is adjacent to an existing landfill, but also a toxic waste landfill. So it gives a little extra challenge, you might say. But regardless, this project is far from being completed. If the city council moves forward with the Sigpoli development, it will come back to you at a future date for any kind of a sale of the property. But I will tell you that this is going to be a long-term process for this developer or any developer, as we're going to have a significant amount of review from the environmental agencies. We'll have a full-blown EIR of the site, and we'll have a significant amount of that EIR will also be focused on traffic, which has been a concern from the community. I say community as we did as a city, had a couple of community meetings to talk about this project, as well as the opportunity for Sigpoli to present the project. And since that time, we've received additional word from, for example, like Santa Anita Racetrack is now saying that they have partnered to potentially do this development as well. So it is something that the owners of Santa Anita Racetrack are looking to have accomplished here in West Covina. And so with that, if there's any questions?
Currently, they're on a 180-day program. Is the second 180 days automatic, or do we have to agree to it?
No, it is automatic based on staff and council's action.
Yeah.
And it's going to be whether or not they fulfill the terms that we asked for in the initial 180 days, which is a draft pro forma, the meeting with the 4 different agencies. Was there anything else, Ms. Morales?
The design concept, yes, and the 4 meetings with
Yes.
the 4 regulatory agencies.
So it will come before the council when time comes.
It will, and so if you look at attachment 2 to your report, I would imagine that you'll see this draft design, and it will change between now and the next time you see the proposed design of the project.
I appreciate staff taking us up on tour. I've been there several times, but I thought it was really helpful, especially with the concept plan in hand. It was great. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
I too look forward to hearing what the agencies have to say about the concept. I would hate for the citizens or council members to have one thing in mind because the developer said they could do it, and then we find out 2 years down the road that, oops, no, you can't. That's gnatcatcher habitat, or that's, a slough that has storm water that's been running for 200 years, or something else. Who knows? There could be some other artifacts out there,
Yes.
So I think that it's a really smart move, taking it this way, and I would look forward to seeing maybe a preliminary report, maybe after you meet with some of the agencies, just on how things are going, and I would love to see an updated concept plan too, so we could, just to understand where they can develop and where they can't, and then hone in on some of the issues, because it is a challenging site.
It is very much so, and it's something that I know the successor agencies already requested, so we'll make sure that that's passed on to you once they have that opportunity to review it as well.
Okay, and then I just have a question in terms of time frame.
Yes.
City manager, so with regard to oversight agency kind of status and the next phase of oversight, which I think is not from us, but from a larger board, what does that mean in terms of our review of this
Well,
project?
what that means is, depending upon how long this takes, you may never see this again.
Okay.
Which is actually probably likely.
Probably likely.
And what is our time frame? I know it's kind of an off-agenda question, but what is our timeline for existence?
July.
July, okay.
That's assuming that,
One,
one, that it's not extended, and 2, that, in this case, LA County decides that they want to
Take
take
it
it.
up, okay. Okay, I think I have one more question, but I'll.
There was one item I failed to mention, and that is on the water tank properties, is that a secondary evaluation appraisal of the property was done, and that information is contained in your report. It did come back surprisingly, actually a little bit less than the first one. However, we've told M&A Bay that they still have to maintain the agreed price that they agreed to on the first appraisal. So we're not looking to reduce the price in terms with them at all at this time.
Okay, sounds good. There was a question that a member of the public brought up to me, and I haven't heard it or seen it written up, and it has to do with the bonds that the city,
What about?
that they shall be repaid somehow with this transaction?
Well, it's still yet to be determined. The intent of the city council, and the council's already taken action to do so, is any revenues generated from the sale of any of the former successor agency properties up there be utilized to pay off the city bonds first. So yes. The hope is that we are able to get a price higher than the appraised value to help reduce that, 'cause the liability of the city. The city issued in 2004 $13.5 million of bonds. And at this time, a little over, I think, $9.5 million is still owed. This was something we did discuss at the last Oversight Board meeting, and the City Council was quite clear that any revenues generated from the sale, we want to pay down these bonds first.
Okay. And you have appraisals of, recent appraisals of this property?
We had the one appraisal done. We're not doing any others at this time until we get closer to the sale of the properties. So it'll be more reflective of the actual project, as well as be current for the actual sale of the properties.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
The original agreement required the Charles Company, or whatever name they're using now, and it's in the report, that they're responsible for installation completion of all public infrastructure. Originally, there was going to be a golf course up there. That's not happening now. Now we have a completely different infrastructure and project that is being proposed. How is it being addressed with them in their plans for the water tank and the infrastructure that they're required to put in, that some of that's changed? What agreements have been reached? What agreements have been discussed about that?
I'll have Ms. Morales correct me if I'm incorrect, but the agreement is for, they have to do the improvements of the infrastructure for their project. However, they do have to provide the water tank property and the infrastructure for the water tank for its site as well as the golf course. I don't believe they're doing any of the infrastructure for the golf course itself, but they have to do the water tank for the water tank use for that. And it's my understanding that they had a tentative design that was prepared by, is it Suburban Water up there? Or Valencia?
So they do have a schematic that they've been working with Suburban Water as in regards to the water system that they would be looking to install that would service their development, as well as upsizing it for the development on the successor agencies, which at the time was a proposed golf course. So it was for the clubhouse, and the reclaimed water was going to service the golf course so itself. But they also were required to do installation of the street improvements up to their property for their development. And so that's something, yes, that we would have to work with them in regards to any changes of potential uses up on the agency parcels.
And so, just to be clear, the schematic for the water tanks, is that taking into account the non-existent golf course, or is it taking into account what is being proposed to go up there?
It would be for the golf course, because we don't have any other development that has been accepted up there as of yet.
And so, we're going to enter into agreement as a successor agency to approve water tanks that may or may not be what's needed for the property up there.
Yes, because, for example, if the Simpoli project doesn't occur and nothing occurs up there for 20 or 30 years, you can't hold back the project of the Charles Company if they wish to move forward.
But has there been any consideration of maybe holding off since you're in the process of negotiating this property?
I don't think we legally can. It would be a question for our city attorney, because they could have a legal challenge saying that we're not allowed to move forward with their development if that was the case.
We've also,
So we can't wait 10 years to put the water tanks in?
No, because they need it for their project.
Or develop the project? Because I believe their contract, those buildings were supposed to be up in about 2008.
They were.
And so, I mean,
But if they're making a conscious effort to try and acquire the property now, and if the city was to say no, then I think they would have a legal ability to sue the city or the Oversight Board, actually, for delaying their project if they wish to move forward on it.
What we could do is work with them and make it where they build the water tanks to service what they need, plus what was originally proposed, the clubhouse, and being able to change it so that they can upscale it, which would be at the developer, or whoever purchases or develops the agency parcels. Because it would really be up to them to pay for those improvements to service those properties.
But, sorry, just to follow up a little bit, but wouldn't it make sense, since you're not considering a golf course at all anymore, to revise some of your agreements with them?
Well, if that was the case, what would you upsize it for?
That's not my question. My question is, if that's not a viable project anymore, I mean, I kind of agree. Why would you require them to do it?
You still are going to have a higher demand for water than what's being proposed for their building.
Okay, so.
Okay, so the question would be then is, what should they upsize it to? And that agreement's already in place. So you're asking the
But
city,
is it based on what?
what was based on when they originally purchased the properties back in.
Maybe it just needs to be updated, the agreement.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. You don't sell somebody a piece of property and then go back several years later, oh, by the way, you need to pay more.
Did the property transfer?
The other properties other than the water tank properties have, yes.
And the other properties that were not used for the golf course?
No, that was their property. So M&A Gabay owns those other two properties for the office buildings.
You don't think, I mean, is there justification that you need the water for uses other than the golf course?
We don't know yet. We don't have a project up there to present to them to negotiate for.
Well, and my question really was kind of the opposite, which is one, they're required to do certain things. Two, we know eventually something will go up there. And so I didn't want them to just develop for their two pads when under the agreement, they are required to put some additional infrastructure and size water tanks in there. And so my question more stems to, are they still going to be doing that? And thank
And
you
the
for the
answer is
clarification that
yes.
says you will be working with them to create a plan that will allow for upsizing as needed, should we reach that point. Because, sorry, Mr. Freeland, but that was much more clear that, yes, it's being looked at.
That's fine.
Okay, and then my next question was, and now that we got so far over there, it was on the bonds. Okay, so I know that the city council has discussed the fact that the bonds need to be paid for with any proceeds from the sale to Singpoli. What protections are going to be in place to make sure those bonds get paid? For example, if Singpoli were to say, hey, you give us this land and we'll build a 150 square foot parcel of land by the lakes for you, and we'll call it even. Well, in that case, there's no proceeds.
Correct.
So how do we make sure that whatever value is given to the city in whatever way is considered proceeds, and so those bonds get paid off?
Well, first of all, I don't believe the Oversight Board has the authority to do that. Oversight Board has the authority to approve the sale.
Yes,
If-
we also have the authority to not approve the sale.
Correct, but what I'm saying is that if there's a like value, it's going to be a policy decision of the city council. So the city council has to make that determination of what they sell, if they determine that value of that property is, and how they sell it. I can't answer that question until the property is done, but
So the answer is there is no protection to make sure
at
that the
this time, there
bonds
isn't.
get paid off, and the city isn't
No,
going to
and
be.
the council at this point doesn't even have the legal authority to bind future councils.
Right.
Correct. But 6 months from now, the council will still be in place, and that's when the agreement expires.
The first round of the agreement, but it could be extended.
Correct. It could be, but it may not be.
True.
And so I know there was discussion in June.
Sorry, just to clarify, you're not
Yes.
talking about the Singpoli agreement, you're talking about the Charles Company agreement?
No, I'm talking about
Singpoli
Singpoli.
development.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know in June there was discussion about the fact that, there's bonds on this property and whether or not we agree that the bonds are actually tied to the property is immaterial at this point. But the assurance was that the Oversight Committee wanted is that those bonds will be paid off, that you're not going to take this asset and sell it to the city for $3 and the city then not pay down the bonds.
Right. I think the best the Oversight Board can do, and please correct me if I'm incorrect, is if you wish, and rather than just receive and file motion, do a motion that your recommendation would be is that any proceeds of the sale be to pay off those bonds. I know it's not binding, but at least it shows that that's the concern of the Oversight Board. I don't
Yes,
think
and
there's anything
then
else
any-
binding.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's obviously the most you can
Has
do.
to be
I mean,
To agendize for next,
No, you can do it as part of this if you wanted to.
The next agenda, if we don't meet until.
can you?
can you, the Oversight Board has the ability to
Amend
adopt a
this.
motion, you're going to receive and file this, but you can make a motion that it's your recommendation that any proceeds from the sale of either of these properties
Yeah.
are used to,
We
or
can
just
make a
the first
motion
property.
today and vote on that today?
Yes.
It's not on the agenda?
It's a part of consideration of the
Okay.
update of, and again, what you're voting on isn't binding on anybody. It's not even binding on you. I mean, and it's certainly not binding on whoever the Oversight Board is in
It's on
6 months.
On 4D, but it's a message back to the successor agency,
That's right.
right?
Well, it'll be a part of the minutes in perpetuity.
Okay. Am I hearing a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Second?
I second that.
Okay,
If I may
let's
add, you
clarify
want it
that.
just on the Simpoli properties or the Simpoli and the water tank properties?
Yeah.
Well,
Is it?
you said it's about 9.5 million that's still owed.
Correct.
Okay, so that's taxpayers' burden, and we're trying to relieve that. So that 9.5, if we could, please.
Well, that's we're asking for clarification. That's all I'm asking.
It should be on both properties.
Yeah, I mean,
We might,
Yeah,
I'll
there you
amend my
go.
motion to be both
Yeah.
All of the
properties.
properties that you're reporting on today,
Perfect.
right? Yeah. Okay. All of the proceeds, this is the motion, all the proceeds.
Microphone, please, so they can pick you up.
Want to restate the motion?
If I may.
Please.
And please correct me, is that the Oversight Board recommends to the successor agency that the proceeds from the properties identified as the former golf course development, as well as the water tank development, any sale proceeds be utilized to pay down the bonds currently issued up there for the former golf course.
Sounds,
Any and all proceeds, including in-kind proceeds, meaning exactly what I said. If they say, we'll build a building somewhere else, whatever the value of that is, the city needs to somehow find a way to pay off those bonds.
You can do that, but again, that's not going to be binding, but that's fine.
and what is the bond name exactly? So that all proceeds from the sales of these properties
Off the
be
2004 golf course bonds.
okay,
Actually, I can give you the, yeah, that's the not wrong.
close enough.
golf
What's that?
course
That's close enough.
Okay. Sounds good. So we had a motion, we have a second. Any additional discussion, board members? Any,
And it includes receiving and filing the
and
updates.
receiving and
The two
filing?
reports.
Okay. Anyone from the public care to share? Yes, sir? Is that okay?
No.
Oh. Never mind.
You have a motion,
Glad you said it, not me.
Not allowed to have the public
you
comment?
have a motion and a second on the floor. It's,
Oh, you want us to vote
yes, so you need to vote.
first? Oh, okay.
Well, not first, yeah.
Ah.
Oral communications, the meeting's been completed.
Not where I
so-
come from, it's public comment before you vote, right?
Well, public comment has already occurred, so now you're on the agendas.
But I
It is.
mean, we had a public comment, but it was on the meeting. But
And-
we have had no public comment on this
I'll
item.
refer to the attorney.
Anyone who requested prior to a motion being made to speak on the matter
Oh, okay.
is entitled to do that.
Okey-doke.
But once
Made the motion.
you've had the discussion up here and you
Oh.
have a motion and a second, you need to vote on the motion.
All right then, roll call vote. All those in favor?
Chavez? Yes. Rojas? Shoemaker?
Yes.
Stewart?
Aye.
Sykes?
Aye.
Sutkin?
Yes. Okay, approved. Thank you. So we have with that also received and filed that report. Okay, so we're moving on. What else do we have? So that was C, we're at D then?
That's correct.
Item D, okay.
Real quick brief staff report, and then I'll turn over to Ms. Morales for, if there's any questions. Before you for consideration is the ROPS for the period of July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. They are now being submitted on an annual basis, as you may recall. So the successor agency approved at their last meeting. We're looking for the Oversight Board's approval of it. I will note a couple of items that have been placed back on here based on discussions with the Department of Finance that have been denied in the past. One is just this past ROPS period, the state of California has stopped the payments towards the pensions of former redevelopment agency employees statewide. The reasoning that the Department of Finance is using is that they need some sort of direction from the legislative body, the state legislation, because the successor agencies, and the attorney can correct me, is the intent is successor agencies are supposed to wind down the operations of the redevelopment agencies. Pensions are going to be around probably a lot longer than those successor agencies will be. So the Department of Finance is looking for a legislative fix to try and wrap up pension liabilities quicker.
Yeah. Actually, the Department of Finance tries to rely on the fact that they don't believe that there's any contract which requires.
Correct.
And that's not saleable under the language of the current law. And so DOF, what DOF did on the same day for every city or every successor agency in California was say no. Even if they'd said yes, cities that they've been allowing that on the ROPS for the past 5 years, they've said, okay, well, sorry, no.
I have a question.
But they have actually, in the lawyer's point of view, no legal justification to do that. So the, quote, legislative fix is to try and get them out of a hole that they put themselves in.
Right.
Pension, but I don't recall ever seeing a pension obligation for former employees
Oh,
on the ROPS.
I didn't say here.
Oh, you know, it's been listed on here in the past.
Here, on our ROPS?
Okay, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. You don't have a oh, there's ROPS. Somebody has a ROPS. I don't have, oh, here we go.
And then in addition,
And actually, the language of the statute, particularly for literally redevelopment agency employees as opposed to cost sharing between the city and the redevelopment agency. The language of the statute, I think, is abundantly clear that that's recognized.
Should be, okay.
And DOF has made a mistake and trying now to fix it in the legislature.
and number two is, as we mentioned on the tour, is there is some repairs and maintenance that needs to be done at the landfill, or not the landfill itself, but on the successor agency property. We've talked about the retention basin as well as the fencing. Department of Finance, it's kind of ironic. You've got another state agency, being DTSC and Cal Recycle, say you have to do these repairs to your property, and the Department of Finance, which is another state agency, say no, we don't want to. So the successor agency and oversight board are kind of in the middle, but the Department of Finance has agreed to re-examine it, and they're doing that for us. In addition, there's been on the ROPS in the past what we call the sales tax reimbursement agreement between the city and the former redevelopment agency with regards to what we call the CFD for the Plaza West Covina. As you may recall, there was a diversion of sales tax from the city of West Covina over the period of the last 20 so years for the bonds and the CFD, which is over at the Plaza West Covina, for the parking structure and improvements they made at the plaza many, many years ago. And so with that reimbursement agreement, we are seeking the Department of Finance's approval because there's over $30 million we believe has been diverted from the city of West Covina. And so we're trying to get those funds back to West Covina.
To whom? To the special district?
No, back to the city's coffers, actually.
But where has it gone?
So what happens is sales tax is generated at the Plaza West Covina,
Yeah.
and then it's going directly into the CFD to pay for the bonds and the debt of that CFD. The city and the agency, back when the CFD was originally established, put an agreement in place as we, as a city, acknowledge that the redevelopment agency at that time doesn't have the resources to pay that debt, so therefore the city will allow the diversion of the sales tax, but the agency, when it's able to, will be able to start paying the city back. And so that agreement was in place. Department of Finance has ruled at this time that that's not an enforceable obligation. We have said that, no, that it is. We provide them additional documentation that they're currently reviewing.
The community, it's like a community facilities district?
Exactly right.
But it's run by the city.
It is, but it's separate, it's a separate body. It's a separate taxing body.
Yeah, I mean, the CFD generates a tax for the property that's within its territory.
So you know where that 20 million is? I mean,
Where?
The CFD has been collecting it, right?
Yeah, and they've been paying the bonds and the debt of the CFD.
Okay.
Right, but the sales tax should have gone to the city, because they could have used other financing
Portion,
mechanisms.
small portion.
at the time.
CFD obviously doesn't generate sales tax.
Right. CFD would be able to use the property tax increment, but at the time, it didn't have sufficient. So that's why the sales tax agreement was put in place.
Okay, well, so may I ask a question just on the format? The red means what, the highlighted?
Red are items that are either going to be deleted or there's funds not being allocated. If that's correct, Ms. Morales?
The red line items are ones that, yes, correct, that we are trying to retire, or have been retired. Also, line items that the Department of Finance did not approve. And so as Executive Director Freeland mentioned, line items 1551, for example, are the retirement or pension funds that were denied in the last drops period that we are putting on requesting funds again this year.
Okay, and then is that, you're saying that additional detention basin cost is not on here now? Or
It is on here.
where is that?
So the repairs that we need to make to the retention basin, as well as the fence that needs to go up between the successor agency property and the landfill are on here, and that's line item 134.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why those are red as well, because they were denied in the past. There was one line item that was added to this ROPS. We refinanced the several bonds, and so the trustee is charging a fee schedule to manage those, and that's what line item 141 is. And it's associated with line item 140, which is the repayment of the actual bonds.
And we ran that back through the Oversight Board last year. You authorized that
Your
as well.
savings.
Yes,
Can you show us it's a savings of interest, right?
it is.
And that's the justification. And where does that show somewhere on
The
here?
savings is not shown on here, but it shows we were refunding items 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Okay.
So we go to the front of the ROBS, items 1, 2, 4, and 5 were the old existing bonds that were refinanced through the County of Los Angeles.
Those you refinance with the County of Los Angeles?
Yes.
And the fee is for other transactions?
The fees for trustee services.
Okay, not the
The-
county, a separate, the bond council and stuff. Okay.
Yeah, not bank, the bank that keeps track of the money and makes payments.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
only $1,000. Okay, any questions? Anyone? No? Okay. We need a motion to receive and file, or
No, actually, there's a resolution to approve. We have to
resolution?
get an
to approve?
Oversight Board resolution, which is
Okay.
attached. Would you like me to read it, Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
Ms. Stewart?
Question?
I'll make a motion to, okay, resolution number OB 0056.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Any,
0056.
sounds good. Item D. Any comments? Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay. Approved, unanimous.
Unanimously approved.
Item D. Thank you. Okay, we're wrapping up. Let me finish through the board member comments, and I would just like to suggest, since the public wasn't ready at the beginning of the meeting, maybe they had time to fill out their cards and submit them for the end of the meeting? Would that be fair? That's fine. Could you fill out a card, Mr. Moreno? You mind? Sure. Public comment card? Okay. Was that okay with the board if we hold public comment at the end of the meeting?
We're going to do board members first.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Is that okay? Just a brief, like, no more than 1 minute kind of thing.
I have a
Okay.
comment on board members.
Okay? Board members?
Board member? Okay. I just like to say that I was one of the ones that took the tour on Monday, and anybody in the city that's really interested, you look at the pictures here, you cannot imagine what this looks like. I mean, this is a huge area, and there's so many possibilities, but you got to take one little baby step at a time to ever get this problem. But I mean, it is actually huge up there. You just can't appreciate how big that place is until you really drive through it. But you know, the only question that come to mind when I was going through there, the only thing that's really kind of definite is the Charles Company and the water situation. What would happen if they decided, well, no, we don't want to do this anymore, and just back out of the whole thing? Where would that put it?
If Eminega Bay said that they weren't going to build their project,
Yeah, just back out, you know.
I think the city would have the ability to go back and sue them for damages, in my opinion. I would defer to attorney, but I would seek that from the city council.
Enough to cover the cost of the water?
Oh, absolutely, because that's a requirement, yes.
Yeah.
They do currently have bonds in place for the proposed project that they submitted
you go.
back when they purchased the property.
They do
So
have bonds in place? I didn't know that. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also took the tour, and you can see quite a bit up there. The view is fantastic, and you can also see Industry Hills, and I've been to events there for over 40 years, about 40 years, to various events, so we know that it's possible, and that's why I'm supportive of the Singpoli project. We haven't really had any viable entities that have come to help. And at this time, I also want to make sure that this is not going to cost the taxpayers, that Singpoli is presenting this project to all these various regulatory bodies. And we need that, so that way we can find out if we can do something like Industry Hills already has, or anything between the idea of which has been approved already, the golf course. And so now we want to see what else they would actually approve in 2018. And that's why I'm supportive of this, to see what we can actually do with what we have. We are one of the few cities that still have this open space, and it would be nice, especially since we've spent over $9 million. The taxpayers have already invested. They've already invested quite a bit, and we're not getting much return right now for our money. When you drove up there, you can see that the dirt was moved around, which helped pave things. It doesn't smell right now. It's really amazing that we used to be able to drive by it and you would smell it. And now what they've done up there to pave it over, cover it, cap it, has really helped. And I think with technology, there are a lot of possibilities. Of course, we've had people talk about solar farm. We haven't gotten it yet, but I'm sure all these folks out here would love all that to come. So, yes, I'm supportive of this exploratory check to see what we can get approved. And thank you for the tour, staff.
I also wanted to say thank you again to staff. I really appreciate it. It's a big project. It's bigger than a city. It's, it's 100 and almost 200 acres. And I think it will be really exciting for the next generation. And, it's a lot of work.
And we'll see if we bring it back to you folks.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you. And with that, we're going to conclude our portion, and I would like to ask Mr. Moreno to speak to us briefly.
Mr. Sykes, if you can push the button, turn it on. Okay.
I speak to this body as one West Covina taxpayer. When the gentleman who is sitting in Mr. Freeland's chair was Andrew Pazmat, I asked him questions in front of this body. On the city's letterhead, he responded to me and tried to correct what I quoted here to this body. And what he wrote surprised me. Basically, he said what had occurred under his tenure under redevelopment, if something was wrong, the statute of limitations have been exceeded. I'm a cop. I'm a cop for 34 years. You don't use that term unless you kind of indicate that you've committed a crime. In 2007, now you're saying that retirement may have to be paid from the successor agency and be transferred to the general fund because of changes right now going about with the dissolution of redevelopment. And I oppose that because Andrew Pasmat with the city council passed a resolution in 2007 at a city council meeting. And the resolution passed for Andrew Pasmat was a supplemental retirement. And it included all the years he didn't work for the city of West Covina, but had worked for 2 other cities. That's an illegal contract. You have to give time for money or material from somebody else to be a legal contract. Well, if we were already paying you and that you had already been paid by the other entities, how can you charge the taxpayers of West Covina for what you have already been compensated? I will bring to you at the next meeting of this body, and I will bring to Chris Freeland if he wants it tomorrow, the response from Andrew Pasmat. But to get a supplemental retirement and put it on the burden of the taxpayers for all the years you didn't work for West Covina is illegal. And I refuse to have that added to the general fund. We're trying to scrap for dollars for this city. Second of all, my friend behind me, John Shoemaker, made a request to the city of West Covina. And the request for information was the Gulf Fund bond. What was the money spent on? And Kerry, you've heard this before. We can't find the documents, is the response he got. How is that possible? That the taxpayers of West Covina can't find out where the money was spent on a bond? Well, if you can't get it from the city, whoever issued the bond should be able to tell you what the signature page says on it. Right. Do you want to know when Andrew Pasmat left my city? When Mike Gregorian, the representative from Mount Sac, asked Andrew Pasmat, I don't want you coming and presenting anything to us unless you can bring us the signature page. Because you corrected one time the person talking about you can't get out of a 20-year lease that was renewable every 5 years. Do you remember that?
Excuse me, we have a member of the community speaking.
So what I want you to
Your
understand is
microphone's
this. We have a right to know, and maybe this body can ask for, what John Shoemaker cannot get. What was the money spent on for the bond issued for the golf course? And number 2, do the taxpayers of West Covina owe somebody for the years they did not work for West Covina? Thank you.
Thoughtful.
Did you want the attorney and I to try and respond to those, or do you want to hear it from Mr. Shoemaker first, or?
Yeah, I think it's best to maybe just respond in writing or something, right? Okay.
Just want to commend all of you for wanting to try to take care of the taxpayers of West Covina by saying, pay these bonds off if you're going to do it. What staff sometimes seems to forget is they're asking you to not give other taxing authorities the money they're entitled to. You know, the city, out of any money that they would get for that property, is only entitled to 18% of it or 13% of it. So there's your bargaining chip. I know you probably know that, but just to emphasize, your bargaining chip is you do this or you're only going to get this much. Kind of easy to figure out. And it seems like they should be, you know, if I was on the city council, I'd be saying, if they're going to give up, you know, if out of $10 million, I'm only going to get 1.8, and if I say I'll pay off those bonds and contractually obligate our city to do it, hey, you're giving me $8.2 million I'm not entitled to. And I would sign off on it. You know, I think our city council should be doing that, saying, if you're willing to give up all that money to get us out of trouble because we made a mistake as a city. They should be jumping all over it instead of saying, well, it's not binding, there's nothing you can do, you can't say this. Yeah, you can just say, okay, we'll just keep our money. And that's really what it comes down to. I think it's a little arrogant to take the other approach. You know, they're asking you to give up something, and the organizations you represent to give up something, and they're not willing to say, there's no way we're not going to pay those things off. You know, so I think we need to, you know, look at those things. And just to, the request I made too was, if also not only what did we spend the golf course money on, but did we ever get paid for any of that? Because they spent money to move dirt around, to take it down to the heights, to take it to Big League Dreams. Did that mean a piece of land did include X amount of dollars? Now, this board might decide, okay, you got paid, you didn't pay down the bonds, you messed up, we're still going to help you out. But it'd be nice to know, was that 9.5 million, should it really be 3 or 4? You know, because of what previous councils did that nobody in this room had any say over it at the time. But it would be nice to know. You know, they're conceivably asking for 2 bites at the apple because they messed up. At least show some leadership or some quality that says, yeah, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever the case may be, we really messed up in this city, and we need you to bail us out. I'll tell you right now, I want you to bail them out because that $500,000 a year can be used for other things, not paying the bonds. So I'm not saying don't do it, but I think you should have all the facts before it goes a different way. So basically, that's all there is to that piece. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Lady? Anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you. I don't want to get into a he said, she said here. I think it's inappropriate, but
I'll be more than happy to meet with Ms. Moreno afterwards.
I do appreciate the public coming forward and the continuity to be on these issues for so long, because they do take many, many years. And if there's anything that was stated that you'd like to respond to, I think that'd be appropriate to us as well.
Oh, if you like it, absolutely.
I think so, yeah.
I think with regards to the comments about what Mr. Moreno refers to as a PARS plan that was done for, actually, I think it was done for former city managers Chung and Pasman. That was done, it's an agreement that says, you know, for those years of service in other cities where they didn't have the same pension formula as West Covina, they put the separate pension program together to fund to the level of West Covina for those years of service that they had at those other previous cities. That is a pension obligation of the entire city. A portion of that would be on the ROPS here, because they were members of the redevelopment agency in that at the time.
I mean, I just have a concern because if the state is not recognizing it either now.
Well, no, it's not. It's a legally binding contract. What happened is the state allowed those for many years, but they just did pension reform back in 2013 that made those, you can no longer do those type of agreements. Prior to that time, you could. And so those agreements were put in place. The state has now since said no to those type of agreements moving forward.
But that's since 2013?
Yes.
And when did this come forward?
Mr. Pasman was city manager from 2001 to 11 or 12.
No, but the supplemental
Yeah,
contract.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I mean, to the extent that,
It's been since I've been on here, since 2012, because he used to be sitting there.
Correct, but that was already in place, so you can't.
No, but was it after 2013?
no, that was an agreement when he was hired.
Yeah, it was an agreement sometime during his term as city manager, before 2013. Actually, and for Mr. Chung as well. It was prior to
I'm just saying,
2013.
let's make sure it is legal. Maybe according to
No,
the
they
state.
are. We've already looked at them many a times.
Okay.
Plus,
and-
PERS does review those as well.
Okay, I would just like, if you don't mind, just a quick written note to that effect, and also about the golf fund bond.
I'll let the attorney respond to that. I mean, what we were unable to provide is the actual receipts that were generated from the construction. Record retention policy only requires maintaining of receipts for the city for a few years. We don't retain receipts for all projects going back 12, 15 years, including bond projects. The trustee at the time of the bonds would have signed off or approved the use of the funds for the projects. So I'm not sure what else we could provide.
Yeah, not much, although whatever the trustee has, assuming that they retain the records. But when we talked about earlier, the trustee services that we're getting paid
Yeah.
for and the other bond issue, that's what the trustee does. Trustee holds the money in the bank. You want to pay a developer or you want to pay a contractor, you send a note to the trustee saying, we want to pay for it, and the trustee says, okay, how much and what is it for? And you sign off on the chit, and the trustee releases the money.
So is
That's kind of the simple version of that.
Okay, Jessica?
So you're really saying that there is no document that is accessible to the city of West Covina that shows how much the bonds were, how much we've paid in interest?
Oh, no,
How many
no.
payments we've made?
No.
How
Oh,
many
no.
credits were issued against?
No,
Because
all that stuff's
Beca-
available. The only
Then
question, as I understand it, is when, if you paid a contractor $50,000 to do some work out of bond proceeds, that apparently because it was 12 years ago, that there are no specific receipts acknowledging that payment.
Well, I think we can acknowledge that the golf was used up there. I think the question really ties into, there's still $9.5 million worth of bonds on there. For those of us who have lived in the city and watched the projects go up and everything else, we know there were other factors in terms of moving dirt, bringing it back, grading and things like that, that there may have been payments for that should have been used to pay down those bonds. And so that's the accounting the public is looking for, is what have we paid on the bonds? What money did we receive that should have been used to pay down those bonds? And I think Mr. Shoemaker just made that really clear when he said, there's 9.5 million, maybe it should be 3 to 4.
I guess I have to go double check, but I don't believe that we would have received revenues from doing the work on a future golf course. But I can double check, see if there's any revenues generated. But I don't imagine if we are issuing the bonds, we are doing the work, the trustee's paying for those bonds to do the work, that there'd be any revenue generated from doing that work.
So are there records that show whether or not the city did grading for the heights? Did we do that as a favor to them? Was there a contract assigned to that?
There were many a contract, I'm not sure, again, to say something was done by a favor, I don't know, because remember, the city owned all that property.
But you're saying you may not have documentation that shows, okay, well, if the city was required as part of the agreement for whichever development company was behind the Heights and Big League Dreams to do grading, well, okay, that would show, here's money that was used that would have been bond money to cover doing that grading. If the city then said, hey, we'll do the grading, but you let us have the dirt where we're removing because we need to cap the landfill site, then that would make sense that there isn't a reduction in the bonds. That is what the community is looking for and trying to understand.
Unfortunately, it sounds like, obviously, I'm not the city attorney, but it sounds like that one, if it were my city, those contracts to do that kind of thing would be a matter of record. The question is, since records in public agencies are only required to be kept, depending upon what they are, 2 years, whether or not they actually exist anymore, as opposed to they were approved and done appropriately at the time. It's just trying to find the information, I gather.
And I have no problem going back and looking to see what kind of agreements were put in place with, because I know that, I'm trying to remember the name, but I think Jaeger Construction, for example, was one of the big firms that did a lot of the work up there. We might be able to find, if we do a record search of the city clerk's documents, what the agreement was for Jaeger Construction. But there should be agreements as far as the city owns all the property at one point, or the redevelopment agency, I should say. So if the redevelopment agency sold the Heights Shopping Center, that's would be part of that deal. Whatever that deal was, it would be in that document.
And for example, it's kind of the same analogy that you used before, that if E.L. Jaeger was contracted with the city to remove dirt, that if E.L. Jaeger could generate revenue by moving it to another site, that'd be reflected in the cost that the city paid as sum total of E.L. Jaeger's contract.
Just as a point, because it would have been cheaper for the city or the redevelopment agency back then to move the dirt onto the landfill versus relocating anywhere else in the community.
Well, and it definitely was cheaper for the contractors to move it 5 feet versus having to truck it out of the city.
But they would have been awarded the bid based on what they were actually doing.
Still, there would have been discussion, hey, our bid can be this much less because we'll, instead of having to truck the dirt out, we could give you a break and we'll move it onto yours. There could have been agreements there.
And I would expect that the RFP that went out probably addressed that.
It may not have, but the contract should, and again, there would be some sort of, one, we would have the contracts of what was happening up there, which could help piece together where the bond money went. And two, there's not a chance you will ever convince me that we don't have receipts, records, something that shows payments we've made on those bonds and everything else throughout the years.
And again, we do have records showing we made payments on the bonds. It's the receipts for the work that those bonds paid for. The trustee would have signed off of those back in 2004, 2005, 2006. But as far as the payments made from the city to the bonds, absolutely, we have the record of that and all the interest and everything.
And, yeah, and presumably, if you struggle to find it, you could find what you paid to contractors out of bond proceeds. I don't even know that a receipt, I mean, there's nothing.
It's a contract.
I mean, it's not like you go to Staples and buy something, they email you the receipt. It's, the contractor sends you a bill and you write a check.
Okay, but it seems that this is a reasonable line of questioning, that there's a lot of concern and, from the community that kind of stops, it seems, that's my experience, just talking about this for a few days now with people, is that the people are frustrated that the city has that kind of bill, and they want to make sure that if the land is sold, that's paid off, or, somehow. What's fair is fair, right?
I would agree, but to think what was in the mind of the folks 12, 13 years ago, we're unable to. I mean, I always tell the current council we're paying for the sins of the past. And so, I mean, it's
Or
really
we're
hard for
getting
us
the
to do that.
benefit of the positive things.
Or we're getting the benefit of the positive. There's you go.
Okay, well, let's see what you can do, just in terms of, just kind of putting the pieces together so that it's understandable, I think, what the city actually paid out. Seems fair. If you can find any of this information or ask the trustee or. Okay, sounds good. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we're going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.